And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Good to be back with you here on The Money Show. I'm Stephen Grootes after a very strange week of public and school holidays last week. On the other hand, after the first sort of quarter-ish of the year, also gave us a chance to catch our breath just a little bit. And I always get the sense at this time of year, especially if you have children, you get into the hard slog of winter. This is when the year's work is really done. By the end of this period, call it end of August, you will probably know how productive your year is going to be. I just get that sense about this time of year. Warren Buffett retiring at the age of 94. It is astonishing to think that someone born in 1930, think about that for a minute, is still working. I mean, how many people would have been retired for almost 30 years by the age of 94? I'm hoping most of them, frankly. I'd like to have been retired for 30 years by then. But it is just an astonishing track record of success. And I often wonder, as people get older, as you start to have these conversations around what are you going to do when this, when that, have you prepared, Warren Ingram, etc., you just kind of worry you just think to yourself, what do you want to be doing at the age of 65, at 70, at 75, at 80? I think a lot of people who work through those ages, if it's safe work, productive work they enjoy, he clearly loves his work they see as successful, actually go for quite a long time. It does keep them going. There are plenty of stories like that. But it is still incredible the amount of money that he has created for people. And you could argue that he hasn't sort of worked for it, it's investment, and that's true. But I think many people will take a lot of lessons from him. The point I'm trying to make is that it is just possible, and we'll have this conversation later in the program, that Warren Buffett maybe has improved investing for everybody. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that maybe he's kind of either way, whether you like him, some people don't, you might just find that actually he's had such a big impact on investing that I would argue he's probably made it in our kind of situation, capitalism. He's made it better for everyone. And by the way, just a reminder, it was my predecessor who told me of this, that his brother, Warren Buffett's brother, actually lives in Limpopo, or did for a very long period of time. And I've actually seen him speak on a platform in, of all places, Rwanda. There's something in the Buffett family, by the way, that makes them so successful at what they do, because Warren Buffett's brother was the person who ran what for a long time was the biggest and one of the most successful NGOs ever on our continent, had a long track record for actually going into difficult places and starting programs that would involve feeding people, starting schools, things like that, would look for a place of conflict and start to go in there immediately so that when the conflict ended, he was very well prepped. But there's clearly something in the Buffett genes that makes them incredibly successful at what they do. I was thinking a little bit about Eskom today. They've announced that they're going into this winter stronger than they went into winter last year, and presumably much stronger than the year before that and the year before that. They're not expecting any load shedding. The worst case scenario is sort of 3 weeks of stage 2 load shedding. That's the worst case scenario. I'm thinking that actually the next frontier when it comes to electricity is not about availability at all, although load reduction is still a major problem. It's actually going to be about pricing and whether or not Eskom, and this is going to not entirely make sense, but whether Eskom will be sustainable with electricity at these prices, by which I mean so many people will pull out of Eskom and produce their own electricity because they can't afford Eskom prices. And what does that do for Eskom in the longer run? We'll have that conversation in a few moments as well. Good to have you along with us this morning. This evening, it's 12 minutes after 6.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, the Labour Department is now investigating changes to the Code of Practice in Dismissals. In theory, it would seem the idea is to make it slightly easier for employers to fire some workers under certain circumstances. The Labour Department's argument seems to be this will help to reduce unemployment. It will provide clearer guidance on when someone can be fired and when they can't, and thus encourage firms to hire more people more quickly. That's the argument. The tension around this, by the way, has been present for perhaps the last 30 years. Unions argue workers will be exploited if it's easy for them to be fired. Employers groups claim if firms can fire someone who's not working, they're more likely to hire them in the first place. I was reminded today, many people believe that one of the reasons the US economy has grown so strongly is that it's always been relatively easy to fire someone who doesn't perform. Mamokgethi Molopyane is a Labour Analyst, has been involved in the sector for many years. Mamokgethi, good evening. Good to talk to you again. This is about the Code of Practice on Dismissal. Seems to still be in the consultation stage. Are you seeing major changes here? It would be quite a thing for the Labour Department to make it very slightly easier to fire someone.
Good evening, Stephen. Yes, it's a significant change. I think it probably marks one of the first major reforms we've seen in our labor practices, but also in terms of the South African employment dismissal framework. You'd recall that currently the draft code, as it is in its draft format, consolidates Schedule 8 of Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act that had to do with the process of letting go of workers and so forth. Everything was kind of like in a different places all over, and it has consolidated that and introduced several changes regarding that are fundamental in the shift in terms of its approach from what the private sector has always said are rigid, procedurally rigid labor laws, and now they are becoming more flexible. And as you had said in the introduction, they're going to make that easy, as long as, of course, they are following the proper procedure in dismissal to let go of people.
I mean, for years we've had, particularly in government, people who just sit at home and do nothing, very difficult to fire. There'll be court cases, things like that. Could this... I mean, just the idea that somebody might be fired for not doing their job might hopefully lead to more productivity on one version. I mean, unions will oppose this and they'll oppose it strongly.
Unions are going to come out very strongly against it. I think already they have been, if you listen to some of the speeches on May Day and some of the statements the union leaders, different union leaders were making, it's clear that they are going to come out strong against this. It actually might, in a way, revive them in a sense because they have been silent on several key issues. One of the things that this changes is going to do is it's going to streamline procedures, in terms of the rigid time frames. You'd recall that there has to be a 48-hour notice period. There has to be reasonable standards and offering employees greater opportunities in terms of flexibility while maintaining fairness. And so those are some of the changes that we are seeing in the draft that was, if I'm not wrong, gazetted in 21st January this year. It's 20-page long, and I'd encourage your listeners to really spend time with it to be able to see the changes. So it's going to make much easier for the employers to follow in terms of the code of good practice of dismissal, make it much easier for them to dismiss workers. However, Stephen, we know government that this on paper might seem very well thought, very well planned, but we know there are bound to be bottlenecks in the processes of government as they unfold. So I guess in a way the proof will be once it is implemented, and first of all if it goes through and how that is implemented and how that takes hold and the practicality of it in terms of implementing it. But rest assured the unions are going to come out guns blazing with this against it.
And I mean, they may do that, I'm sure you're right, but they're weaker than they've been in 30 years. The DA is now in government, or at least for the moment. My sense, and this is just a sort of listening to people talking on talk radio about unions, so it's not entirely scientific, is that unions are not nearly as popular as they used to be.
No, they're not. One of the challenges unions have struggled to do is the past perhaps 20 years, they've struggled to adapt to the changing in the workplace. They struggled to adapt to the pace of changes that are not just brought by technology, but the pace of change in terms of the kind of work, the kind of occupations, the kind of skills that are needed. They have fallen behind in terms of their strategies of adapting to those changes. And often, perhaps in South Africa, they have lost the ability to resonate with many of the challenges that people are facing. For example, we have a high youth unemployment rate. Many of our young graduates are unemployed. Unions hardly resonate with many young people who have qualifications and cannot find jobs. So those are some of the, that's why they are arguably at their weakest, and somehow their strategies are not yielding results.
Mamokgethi Molopyane, Labour Analyst, thank you very much indeed for your time tonight on The Money Show.
702.
702.
Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, Eskom confirming today it's going into winter stronger than it did last year. It doesn't expect to have load shedding so long as unplanned outages are below 13,000 megawatts. The worst case scenario, says Eskom, only 3 weeks of stage 2 load shedding. The worst case scenario last year involved stage 5 load shedding, and there was no load shedding at all. Professor Vali Padiachi is a power and energy expert and a former executive manager of Eskom and a former senior executive at City Power in Joburg. Vali, good evening. Eskom does, on the numbers, certainly appear to be stronger than it was ahead of last winter. Do you believe them? I mean, do you expect there to be no load shedding this winter?
Good evening, Stephen, to you and your listeners, and thank you for inviting me to the Money Show. No, I believe them, but I'm of the opinion, and I've said this a number of times in the last couple of weeks, that they would load shed because they are still not out of the woods in terms of risk. I think they've also alluded to that today. The minister has also made that comment as well. And from the briefing today, and they had the whole team there. They had the minister, the chairman, the CEO, and various executives. So from the data, as you've alluded to, and from my knowledge of the system and the grid over the years, I'm of the opinion that they will more than likely load shed. Hopefully, in my opinion, they keep it to under stage 3, because just 2 points that I want to make here is that the EAF is still very low. That's about 57%. And there was no clarity given on whether there's enough reserve margin or headroom. So based on that, and my final point is that for load shedding to happen, some things must happen, some things must not happen. And I'm not so sure that that they will not happen or happen, Stephen.
Is the vulnerability what it's always been? Our coal-fired power stations, a huge amount of maintenance for them over the years, but are some of them still quite vulnerable?
Yes, I think the minister also alluded to that last week, where he said that he was not happy with the comebacks of some of the coal-fired stations for unplanned maintenance, and even the group executive generation alluded to that, where some of the better performing old coal-fired power stations are also going on the blink at the moment, and like Matumba and Letabo, etc. And hopefully those units would hold. But I think where the positive is that they're expecting another 2,500, 3,000 megawatts by the end of May, additional megawatts to be on the grid. So hopefully that adds to the positivity, but at the same time we must not have units breaking down. Stephen.
I mean, the other thing that worries me a little bit, Vali, is I think the next frontier of all of this is not about so much the availability of power. I'm worried, as you say, that there is a possibility of load shedding. But I'm worried about the price of electricity, and the way things are going is surely not sustainable for Eskom, by which I mean the price that they charge for electricity has gone up by so much, so quickly. People and companies are looking for any other avenue to generate their own electricity. And if this goes on for much longer, Eskom simply won't get enough revenue because so many people will be getting their electricity from elsewhere.
Yes, Stephen, I think as an independent view, I can't negate that. I think that you're absolutely sort of correct. In fact, even the middle class, and I consider myself as a member of the middle class, also is finding these new prices quite difficult. So you're absolutely correct that unless this changes. But in fairness, it cannot only be Eskom and the municipalities that needs to address this. Government and the regulator has to also play a part in harmonizing what I call the affordability and the cost-effective tariffs, Stephen. And that has to not happen yesterday, but the day before yesterday.
Indeed. Professor Vali Pariachi, thank you. Power and energy expert, former executive manager of Eskom and former senior executive of City Power Johannesburg.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Siboniso Ngomalo is the Chief Investment Officer at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Siboniso, good evening to you. Finally, from Goldfields, they've completed that purchase of the Australian miner Gold Road, 44 billion rand in terms of our currency, but a good strategic asset for them.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners. Completed, Stephen, is not quite the word. They've proposed what they say is a final deal, and this particular deal is up from their previous deal. So previously they offered 3.3 billion Aussie dollars. Now they've upped the price to 3.7, and they're saying this is our final price. Now, for this deal to go through, the shareholders of Gold Road have to approve it by 75%. And at the moment, they in their communication, Goldfield said, hey, 7.51% have offered support to date. And so therefore, there's a little bit of a standoff. But let's take a step back. I suppose from a market perspective, we are looking at this and saying, why are they buying another gold asset at such high gold prices? That's going to obviously add a lot more debt to them because they're making a cash offer. So from our perspective, we're looking at this and saying, ooh, there's uncertainty here in terms of, actually, is this really the right thing to do? And usually when companies, especially commodities companies, do deals, it usually signals the top of a cycle, Stephen.
Are you suggesting then that the gold price might be near the top right now?
Well, we don't know. It's a very, very difficult thing to actually forecast. But when we look at it, Stephen, we look at the underlying drivers of gold. So why has gold gone up? Gold has gone up quite materially, over 30% year to date. The share price, say, Harmony is up, I think, over 100%. Goldfield's up just over 80% year to date. And we are we're beginning month number 5. And if you look at the drivers, most of this has been driven by central bank buying. So central banks globally have been diversifying from U.S. treasuries and saying, hey, we're going to put money in gold as a safety hedge. Obviously, we can see what's happened geopolitically, especially after Trump coming in. So gold is a hedge against fear in terms of global worries and global markets. The speed, though, so when we look at the gold price has gone up so fast. I think it's broken through 3 standard deviations relative to what is normal, and that actually is usually very difficult to sustain. But again, Stephen, it depends on what happens globally. But here, we would urge some caution.
I mean, Harmony, they had a 9-month update out to the end of March. They had a 20% increase in gold revenue, and presumably a major part of that is the price.
Yes, it definitely is. But Stephen, again, when you look deeper here, their production, so their third quarter production is down 10% year on year, so that's a bit disappointing. But their cash costs are up 19%. So yes, gold price has risen, but what usually happens again in gold companies is that to mine the commodity that now obviously you're earning a lot more will cost more. So we're starting to see some cost inflation coming in. And hence the market looked at it and said, ooh, that is not as good as what the market has anticipated. And neither is it as good as actually what Harmony itself had guided before. So the market is not quite taking as excited a view in terms of what Harmony's performance is.
The chicken producer Astral, they signaled that there'll be lower earnings, quite significantly actually. Chicken, there's a lot of competition in the frozen chicken space. Maize prices, the main ingredient for them, are very high. I mean, quite difficult for them in a way.
Very, very difficult. Because ultimately, what is Astral? Astral produces chickens, but chickens are basically beneficiated maize. You feed them, and therefore the price of the maize matters. and the price that you sell the chicken at. If the price of the input, which is the food, the feedstock, the maize that you feed the chicken increases, and yet you're not getting as much revenue because of obviously economic pressure, competitive pressure, which happens actually in a company like Astro, then actually you don't get the returns. And so therefore they've said, hey, our profits are going to be down just north of 60%.
And Sibaniso, quickly, if you can, Warren Buffett stepping down, has he changed investing, do you think?
He definitely has. For every young analyst that joins our team and joins our industry, they study Buffett. But why do you study him? Because Buffett, over the 60 years of investing, his returns are 5.5 million% versus the market, which is 39,000%. So Buffett's 60 years, from 1965 to 2004, his returns are basically 19.9% a year versus the market, which is half, which is about 10.4%. That is exceptional. Investing with somebody who is going to compound your money for 60 years at close to 20%, which is then close to double what the market has done. Truly exceptional. A legend.
Sibaniso Nxumalo, thanks very much indeed. Like the way you put that. Chief Investment Officer at the Old Mutual Investment Group.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Good to hear from you this evening on 011 883 0702 and 0214460567. Voice notes, of course, on 072 702 1702. Interesting that update from Astral, just talking about how tough the frozen chicken space is at the moment. A lot of promotional activity there, it would seem, and then high maize prices, big problems for them as well. Chicken producers are so interesting because they tell us so much about what's happening in the economy. High maize prices affect everybody. It's the sort of multiplier in the agricultural economy. And at the same time, of course, it does seem that there's that promotional activity. I do wonder if you ever spend much time looking at the price of chicken and just have a look at how tough the competition there is, and just also understand that our entire poultry industry, the produce of that could fit into one farm in Brazil. There are about 6 farms, I understand, that dominate the industry in Brazil, or just one of them pretty much matches our entire poultry industry.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, in the US, shares in Berkshire Hathaway opening lower today. The announcement over the weekend that Warren Buffett is retiring after 60 years. That's 60 years at the helm. He's taken what I suppose was really a small textile company. He's made it into a massive holding company. It's worth $1.2 trillion. You heard earlier from Sibaniso Nxumalo the unbelievable value he's created. Deon Gouws is Chief Investment Officer at Credo. Deon, good evening. You've actually been to one of Warren Buffett's famous conferences in Omaha. How was he able to be so successful for so long?
Hi, Stephen. Yes, thank you. Good to talk again. I think the answer is in the question. You ask, how has he been successful for so long? I think a very big part of the answer is simply the power of compounding, and that's linked to the period that you have available. He famously, he's been in charge of Berkshire Hathaway for more than 60 years, but he started investing in his personal capacity when he was 10 years old. So he's got an 84-year track record today, and he's built a tremendous amount of value for himself. He's worth something like $160 billion today. But as Morgan Housel wrote in his book, The Psychology of Money, a couple of years ago, he said, Warren Buffett's skill may have been investing, but his secret was time. And he then explains the fact that if Warren, the example he gives is, he says, if you had a more normal career, like a lot of us professional investors, that come into your program, who, go to school, go to university, and they take a bit of time before they find their feet. And they may have a successful career from, let's say, the age of 30 to, let's say, the age of 60, when they would consider retirement. He says he would have had 99% less value today than what he does have, and nobody would have known about him. But he's been able to do very well, but for an extremely a long period of time. And as I say, that is the secret of compounding, which is actually very difficult for the human brain just to fathom, but that's a very big part of the secret.
Deon, you saw him in person. You joined what really became a pilgrimage to Omaha. Was that something special?
It was, but the interesting thing is, I've been considering a number of times since then to go again. Of course, it's too late now. You won't chat there again. It's the kind of thing. A friend of me asked me about 6 months ago, should he go? Once in a lifetime. Also, somebody who's been in investments essentially all his life and he's never been. And my answer to him was, I think it's a little bit similar to going to a major sports event. Let's say you get the opportunity to go to a World Cup final in your chosen sport, rugby or anything else. It's great to be there. The atmosphere is fantastic. You'll always remember it. But frankly, you see better and you get the benefit of replays and commentary and analysis when you watch it on television. So you don't really learn that much from the man, but you get an insight into a little bit of human behavior. And of course, I think of late, I was there 21 years ago. I think in the last few years, it actually evolved a lot. And I think a lot of people went and kept going back, not so much just to see Buffett in action, and until a couple of years, Charlie Munger as well, but also because of the sense of community and for all the side events. So the side events, I think, begin early in the week, perhaps on the Wednesday, Thursday, with additional sort of panel discussions and other get-togethers by all different groups of value investors. So yes, it was very memorable, and I'm very thankful that I was able to go. Sadly, no longer.
Deon Gouws, thank you. Chief Investment Officer at Credo. Warren Ingram, it is only a Monday, but he's the co-founder of Galileo Capital. Warren, good evening to you. Is there something from Buffett's investment philosophy we can all follow? Do you think he's changed investing in a way? We all kind of, in a way, have something from Warren Buffett in us if we invest?
I think he did it with such humility and made some incredibly complex topics and decisions sound very simple. And one of the things he taught us all, and he really made it easy for us to understand, is that it's okay to make investment mistakes. And it's very rare that you find high-powered CEOs of companies talking about their mistakes more than they talk about their successes. Usually CEOs of companies like that are phenomenally fragile in their egos, as you know, Stephen, and you can't point out the flaws. You should just praise them. And he would spend a lot of his time talking about the things that didn't go well. And so for all of us, when we make investment decisions, it's impossible that we're going to be correct and accurate all the time. And here you've got arguably the world's greatest investor telling you that it's fine. And actually, you learn a lot from those mistakes. Don't repeat them, but make new ones, and then stick with your process and keep going. And for me, that was phenomenally powerful to hear that from such a humble, folksy man who's clearly brilliant, but able to distill the stuff into language that even I can understand.
He did it for so long. Greg Abel takes over. It's a very well-managed transition, I must say. Buffett will stay on his chair. Is Berkshire going to be able to do as well without him? I mean, there's a philosophy, sure, but is that enough?
I think we need to understand Berkshire, the business, in two ways. One, a lot of attention has been paid to the way that, Warren Buffett and the team have invested in listed companies. But I think if you had to ask me what was the real secret of Buffett's, was he operated with tremendous integrity. And what that meant was that he could go to entrepreneurs who were running very successful businesses and convince them to join into the Berkshire Hathaway stable and sell their entire business into Berkshire and then continue to operate it unfettered by interference. And I think that's the secret. Someone like Greg Abel is no one's portfolio manager. He's never managed a portfolio of shares in his life. But what he is going to do is continue the legacy of operating very large businesses and allowing CEOs to run those businesses without interference, as long as they all agree on the principles. And I think that's the key in this whole thing, Stephen, is we shouldn't get distracted by what he did, investing in listed shares. That was phenomenal. But actually, he bought enormous companies and then allowed them to get much, much bigger. And I think that's Greg's challenge. But the real problem is they sit on so much cash that in order to move the needle, in order for them to make an acquisition which is going to push their business size up by 5 or 10%, they probably could buy the whole of the JSE and it wouldn't really move their needle. So I feel sorry for him, because he's going to find it very difficult to make very large, meaningful acquisitions.
Are we ever going to see anything like Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett again? Is it a once-off? investing has changed. There's a lot more sort of computers and AI and all the rest. Do you think we're ever going to see such a long, almost unblemished track record again?
I mean, it's extremely unlikely. I mean, I think he is exceptional in every sense of the word. Ever is a long time, but I don't think so. And I think a lot of the time now, the spotlight is so glaring on people who are successful like that they try very hard to get themselves out of the spotlight. They try very hard to delist and get out of the environment of over-regulation and the kind of corporate governance madness that runs listed companies nowadays. And so I think it's unlikely, but you might see it in large private companies, and you might see companies doing incredibly well and getting large in that way, but unlikely to see it in the listed space again.
Warren Ingram, really appreciate the time. Thank you. Looking forward to chatting tomorrow. Co-founder at Galileo Capital. And, of course, Deon Gouws is Chief Investment Officer at Credo.
702.
Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, if you have a view on Warren Buffett or anything else, 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. Goldfields upping its offer for the Australian miner Gold Road. 44 billion rand is what they're offering. The board of Gold Road has unanimously voted to recommend the deal to shareholders, that they accept the offer. 75% of shareholders will need to accept it. Goldfields says the move would immediately enhance its cash flow simply because of the state of the company at the moment. Peter Major is a mining expert and, as you know, someone who's been involved in this space for a long time. He's Director of Mining at Modern Corporate Solutions. Peter, good evening. What's the major attraction of this deal for Goldfields? Is it the Gruyere coal mine, which seems to be producing a lot of gold and will for a long time?
Yes, that is the big attraction, Steve. They're actually the people who built the mine. They went in 50-50 with Gold Road, but they've done the heavy lifting, provided most of funding, all the management, so they know it inside and out. And the deal they had was Gold Road would go out and continue to explore and find other properties. So I think it's a lot of the other properties that do come with this deal that all of a sudden people are saying, well, maybe they're not overpaying. There's a lot of blue sky here. There's some brownfields development. And that is true. If you have gold deposits close to yours and you've built the infrastructure, the mine, the concentrator, we all know brownfields are better value for buck than green fields because there's so much less risk. There's so much more known about it. And this crazy gold price, the thing that I keep thinking is peaked. Well, it's $200 some higher than it was back in March when they made the first offer that I thought was quite an expensive offer. So now it looks like, they're paying really only another 10-11% to get this, but the higher gold price more than justifies that.
The obvious question is how long the price stays high, and that's impossible to answer at this point.
It is, and that's a risk. I remember when Mark Cutifani took over Anglo Gold. I don't think he was there a month or two. He was borrowing money, begging money, probably even stole some to buy out that forward book because Anglo Gold had instituted this insane gold hedging program just because American Barrick did and Newmont did a bit. And it got him in so much debt that when gold was getting even close to 1,000, Mark paid all that off. He had to borrow to the hilt to do it, and I thought he's crazy. Gold had never cracked $900. I think Mark's average price to buy it back was around $11.25, but gold kept on going to 12, 13, 14. So Mark was a hero. Was he a genius? He had either foresight or he had belief, but what he did was right. So got the same here with Mr. Fraser. If gold just stays here, I think he's got an okay deal. If gold goes higher, he made a good deal. But I always get worried when people it looks like they come in late with the gold price run. This gold price has been smoking since 2024. So in 15 months, it's gone from 2,000 to 3,500. I just hate seeing any gold mines being bought now because I think they're paying a lot.
Well, we heard earlier from Sibonisa Ngomalo at Old Mutual that usually this kind of activity does happen at the top of the market. I mean, that's the risk, obviously. And this is the kind of activity you would expect to see.
You do. And I don't know what the percentages are, but it's probably like 8 or 9 deals out of 10. M&A deals don't pay off. They decrease the value of the company, 8 or 9 out of 10. I've heard that figure, and I've seen close to that figure. Now, yes, if the gold price keeps going, that changes the environment. But I don't know. It's just, what's sad, Steve, is they're not building new mines. And they're not building new mines in South Africa. And that's how Anglo-American beat the all-share index for 90 years. Because it created mines from scratch. So it kept all that increase in value for themselves. Mergers and acquisitions, you're handing that money to somebody else, the guy who took the risk and started greenfields. So this is a wake-up call for governments. They should make their environment so attractive that companies would rather invest in the ground and build new projects rather than go outside the country and buy another project in another country at a high premium.
Well, this is the other thing, obviously, is it seems there's very little prospecting or exploration in South Africa. You and I have had this conversation before. I don't know how much gold there might be left in South Africa after all of the mining activity that we've seen here over the last 120 years.
Oh, please, Steve. When they started closing the mines in the 90s, they already had way more gold identified than they'd removed. And that was using methods 40 years old with the new geophysics and drilling techniques. South Africa, up until 20 years ago, had as much gold in the ground as the rest of the world put together, known. But they've continued their prospecting, and we've discontinued ours. There's plenty of gold here, but the environment is so toxic. The politics, the policies are so anti-investment here. Just look at north of us. Those countries are a wreck, Zambia and the DRC, but just because they changed their policy, they have gotten tens of billions of dollars, even though the rest of the countries are falling apart. It's only policy. We could have our number one title back again if we had the right policy. We got the gold.
Peter Major, thank you very much indeed. Mining expert, director of mining at Modern Corporate Solutions. Very interesting to just look at these deals, see what's going on. And of course, the unbelievable gold price at the moment, which is just, no one really knows what's going to happen next. Good to hear from you. We'll hear from Warren and Becky in a few moments. It's good to have you along with us on The Money Show. It's 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. Plenty going on in the next hour here on The Money Show. We'll hear from Moeletsi and Becky in just a moment about some of the issues we should be talking about rather than everyone fighting about the budget. We're also the book, a BOK to Business, or Box to Business, from Scrum to Strategy, applying the Bomb Squad success formula to your business book on The Money Show this evening. I've seen quite a few analogies about teams, about groups of people, all trying to be a bit like the Springboks. We'll go through this one and just see how much merit there is in it. There is obviously a lot to learn from anyone's success, and so it would hold with the Springboks or any successful sporting team, but perhaps particularly because of some aspects of their story, more with them than with others. And then Jack Devnarine, and of course I think most people will remember him from playing Rajesh Kumar in Isidingo, but doing many other things nowadays, become an activist really for people in that job, in that profession, acting. We'll also ask him about Trump's threat or order or whatever you want to call it, this being Trump. On the same day he will announce he's going to reopen Alcatraz, he also said that there'll be 100% tariffs on movies that are produced outside the United States. Well, we'll find out more about that from Jack as well. Good to have you along this evening. You know how to get in touch. 011-883-0702, 021-446-0567, and voice notes this evening on 072-702-1702.
702.
Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, confirmation now from, I understand, the National Treasury and the DA that members of the DA are involved in drawing up the budget that will now be presented on the 21st of May, and inevitably it'll be called Budget 3.0. Also, though, still not clear what's happening with the coalition, whether the DA and the ANC will still be working together. But that does make me worry that some of the big issues that we face as a society are not being tackled at all. Moeletsi and Becky is a political economist. He joins me on the line now, someone with immense experience and knowledge of our society. Moeletsi, good evening, and I really do appreciate the time on The Money Show. Thank you. We've seen all of this fighting around the budget. we should be talking, in my view at least, about youth unemployment, creating jobs for young people. I don't see government dealing with that issue. Do you?
No, I don't see government dealing with not just youth unemployment, but all unemployment in South Africa. So we have but Stephen, our government policy, we have a consumption-driven economic policy. Now, if you have a consumption-driven economic policy, then you don't care about the skills, because what you care about is collecting money from wherever you can find it and giving it to people to consume. That's why at the bottom of it all, we have a consumption-driven economic policy of the ANC and of the Government of National Unity. They are not production and investment-driven economic policies in South Africa. That's why the unemployment is not seen as a problem, as long as you can give the unemployed something to munch on, something to eat on.
I mean, of some of your insights over the years, and whenever I see your name in a publication, I make sure that I read it. Two things stand out for me. The one is the idea that South Africa hasn't really changed from being a sort of mining economy 120 years ago. It was set up in a particular way to mine what was coming out of the ground. And in some ways, that must still hold true. And I think you said that a long time ago. And then something else you must have said maybe 10 years ago was that the ANC as a liberation movement and liberation movements generally seem to be unable to grow economies. How can we get out of those two major traps that we seem to be in?
Well, the short answer is that you have to get rid of liberation movements as the government. Until you get rid of the liberation movements and the heritage of liberation movements, because they actually have never been involved in production. Remember, in the colonial era or in the apartheid era, it's the whites and the white business who run the economy, who know how to run an economy. The liberation movements never run anything, and this is especially the case in terms of apartheid experience in South Africa. Remember, Dr. Verwoerd said that a black child shouldn't aspire beyond being a drawer of water and a hewer of wood. So that's who the liberation movements were. They don't know how a production side of the economy works. So they are really consumers. And that is the problem which Africa has experienced for the last, let's say, 70 years, since the mid-50s, when the colonialism started to end.
I don't know if people might interpret what you're saying as a vote of confidence in the Democratic Alliance. I don't think you mean it to be.
No, the Democratic Alliance is not a party of capitalists. It may be a party led by white people, but it's a middle-class party. Capitalists in South Africa are not involved in politics. They are marginalized from politics. But at the end of the day, they are the people who know how to run a productive economy. They know how to run productive industries and productive businesses.
I'm sure you've seen amid all of this and all of the arguments around the budget, the suggestion that there should be an independent or a politically neutral or a non-party affiliated finance minister, and that during this era of coalitions, that's what we should do. I think it was Barney Mtamputi who suggested it yesterday. I've heard rumblings of similar thoughts, sort of a reminder of what happened with Derek Keyes and Chris Liebenberg during the transition. I must say, in my own view, I think it's problematic that you'd have a finance minister that's not democratically elected as a member of parliament. But would an independent finance minister solve anything, or is the politics the problem?
Yeah, politics is the problem. It's not the finance minister. The present finance minister takes his marching orders from the ANC's National Working Group or the ANC's National Executive Committee. He's willing to pretend that he's making all these decisions all by himself. But these are decisions made by the ANC National Executive Committee. He just implements them. And even if you took somebody who's not a member of the ANC will still give him the marching orders. So that's the reality. We're a democracy, and democracy is run by political parties. And political parties are elected to run the government and to run state policies. That's the nature of the beast, and that's the way it is.
The other big issue at the moment, which has really exploded since the pandemic, is crime and violent crime. And I would say that the rule of law is probably weaker now than it's been for many years. And in fact, the murder detection rate has dropped to around 10%. Only 10% of murders result in some kind of detection or conviction by the state. We cannot improve the lives of our people until that's sorted out. And I worry that for some deep-seated reasons and for some short-term reasons around political management, I don't see an end to the crime wave that we have now. We have to get the guns, we have to improve police leadership, we have to deal with some very deep-seated issues, and I see no suggestion we will.
No, I don't. You see, the problem we're having again, running a state, you have to have managerial expertise. And liberation movements like the ANC don't have managerial expertise. So they have inherited what is actually a very complex state, which also has these huge state-owned enterprises. So they've taken on the responsibility to manage the service side of the state as well as the state-owned enterprises, and they don't have the capability to do all those things. So that's why you get deterioration in this social environment in South Africa. The municipalities aren't functioning, the traffic lights aren't functioning, the potholes are not maintained, the water is not maintained. The sewage system is overflowing. The dams are overflowing. So liberation movements don't have that kind of skill, but they are not willing to ask people who have it, like ask the Indians to come and help them or the Ghanaians to come and help them. They have this false pride, if you wish.
So, Moletsi, what gets us out of this? I mean, in a case where the state starts to fall apart, usually that opens the door for radical parties. Our society is maybe too diverse to let that happen, maybe not. But I mean, is there any solution in sight at all?
No, we have so-called radical parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters, the MK Party, and I don't know who else, Patriotic Alliance, and whatever. We have those kinds of parties. But they can't run a society with the level of sophistication of the South African society, let alone take power in such a society. We have sophisticated voting population in this country, and they are the ones who realized that they supported the ANC, but they also realized the ANC is failing to deliver on what it had promised to deliver. And so they've dumped the ANC. So politically, South Africa is a sophisticated country with a sophisticated voter. So radical parties in South Africa don't make any headway.
Well, Letzi and Becky, very sobering. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time, sir. A political economist, as you can hear, with vast knowledge of what's happening in our country. Also, quite a strict, kind of stern warning in many, many different ways. Your views on that. 19 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Business Books.
All right, well, lots going on, of course, at the moment, and plenty of books, and I'm not entirely surprised to see this. There have already been several books around the Springboks, but as far as I know, this is the first book I've seen that talks around the Springboks and business. It's called Box to Business, From Scrum to Strategy, Applying the Bomb Squad Success Formula to Your Business. It's by P.G. Geldenhuys. We do expect to speak to him in just a moment about his book and why he decided to write it. Someone who's been putting together a lot of information based on the Springboks, but also trying to draw as many lessons as he can from them to try and see what it is that's made them go forward so strongly. One or two sort of brief insights are around grit, the fact that you need to really be in a position where you actually have a little bit of fight in the war. We'll speak to PG Geldenhuys in a few minutes.
Stephen Grootes
Taking your calls
on 011-883-0702.
Let's hear from Edward in Glen Vista. You heard that conversation with Moeletsi and Becky. Edward, good evening.
Hi, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Go for it.
Okay, quick one. I disagree with Becky. To start with, if you look at Burkina Faso, Traore, he was just a soldier and he changed things around. Before him, there was a leader before him that was assassinated.
Sankara, I think it was. Yeah.
That's correct. And then he changed things around. I mean, like, you just need a patriotism, somebody who loves his country, and somebody who knows what the people are looking for. Look, Burkina Faso is doing, this is a very good example in Africa, or in the whole world, in fact, that is doing very well. You don't have to be a capitalist to change the things around. I mean, the unemployment rate is going down, and then the housing, the whole infrastructure in Burkina Faso is he's doing very well for the country. And I wish everybody can understand it's not about capitalism, it's about patriotism. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, thanks very much. Edward in Glen Vista, strong view from him there around that. And of course, everyone's going to have a different view around our politics.
The Money Show.
Business Books.
All right, we've managed to get hold of PG Geldenhuys now. He's the author of the book Box to Business. PG, good evening to you, and thanks so much for your time. I mean, so many people watch the Springboks, have drawn inspiration from them. What was it in their story that made you want to write a book about business around it?
Well, I just found myself talking about Rassie every time I got in front of a corporate audience. Everything that he's done reflects what he should be doing in business. So I thought I'd just write the book about it.
It's easy to say, be like Rassie, but you have to actually map that out. Were there particular parts of the Springbok story or Rassie Erasmus's story that you wanted to emulate?
Well, there were a few things, but particularly it's the man management and it's the vision. The fact that he mapped out the roadmap for the players, then got them to buy into it, and then got the wider public, like all the stakeholders, bought into what he was doing. And it was the thing that I teach when I talk to my clients and corporates, is map out a plan and then make sure that everybody that's in your environment share your values and share your plan. And then you go.
Is it as simple as saying as what will work in rugby will work in business? So rugby is a team of 15 players on the field, a squad of 22, maybe a sort of bigger squad of 50, call it. Business is very different. Will often involve a lot more moving parts, a lot more people.
Well, if you look at the entire team there, right down to the physios, the support staff, the management, it's more like a team of 70, which is really quite a big, medium-sized business.
Okay. But, I mean, there's a lot more going on around a business than there is a rugby team. You've a rugby team, you've got maybe 20 tests a year or whatever. In business, there's a lot more going on, competition from different sides. Is it really the same thing?
100%. You've got to take into account environment. You've got to take into account competitors. You need to use data. You need to make sure that your resources are managed correctly, including your people. All the same principles apply. And if you're in, for example, events or tourism in the business world, you're doing exactly the same thing as Rassie is doing. You're planning around big tentpole events where you have to allocate resources to make sure everybody is ready and is knows their job when the big day comes.
You look at certain examples, Yappy Chef, for example. I mean, why did you pick them? How did you pick the companies you used as examples?
Alignment. Yappy Chef was all about, if you're going to have partners, you need to make sure that you're all on the same page. Rassie, one of the secrets that he got right was to align both with his players, but also with all other stakeholders. For example, the rugby fraternity, international referees. He got everybody on the same page, which was the secret of his success. And a business leader needs to do the same thing. All stakeholders need to be aligned for you to have not an easier, but a better ride.
I mean, so I buy it to an extent, Peter, but I just wonder if the Springbok example, as complicated and as difficult as it is, and representing a complicated and difficult and amazing country, may just be in some ways a little simplistic. I mean, I know you've got checklists and things at the end of the book, and you tie quite a lot to it. But I mean, couldn't you look at any sort of successful team and say, be like them? Couldn't you look at any sort of other successful group of people, Warren Buffett or someone, and say, be like that? I just wonder if it may be a little simplistic in some way.
Well, it's not complicated. It's just hard. All other coaches have tried to do what he's done, but nobody else has succeeded in the same way. So I think, that...
Well, I mean, I'm sorry to bring them up, but the All Blacks won back-to-back World Cups too.
Yeah, and I cite them in the book as well. We basically copied a lot of what they did in terms of creating a culture that aligned all stakeholders. That's what they had, but we didn't have, and that's what Rassie figured out, is how to get us as aligned as the All Blacks, and now we occupy the top perch.
Okay. A big part of success is sustainability. I mean, that's in a way, the hardest thing to do, is to be successful for a long time, whether you're a rugby team or a company.
Yes, 100%. Is there a question?
Well, I was just going to say, how would you advise people do that?
Sustainability.
Yes, sustaining success.
Oh, 100%. So it's called, Jim Collins in Good to Great calls it level 5 leadership. If you look at Rassie in the team picture at the end of the last World Cup, he's sitting at the back. He's not making it about him. He's making it about every single other person in the team. Sustainability from leadership dictates that you help others to shine. It means that you're bringing in place the people, the resources, and the structures for the organization to outlive you. And I hope that he's doing that quite well.
Peter Geltnes, thank you. The book is Box to Business. He's the author. It's called From Scrum to Strategy, Applying the Bomb Squad Success Formula to Your Business.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, it's how I make my money. Time to speak to someone who has had a long career, done very interesting things, and in fact, to an extent, changed career halfway through. His name's Jack Devnarine. He's the actor. He's currently the chair of the SA Guild of Actors. Jack, it's wonderful to see you again. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good to see you, Steve. I'm very upset with your listeners, though. So upset. When you announced that I was going to be a guest on The Money Show, they wanted to know if you were changing the name to The No Money Show.
That's an acting joke, right? That's very good. I've not had someone do that before. That's very good. You grew up in KwaZulu-Natal, if I recall. I think you and I are sort of almost as equally mature as each other. How did you end up in acting? Was that something that you always wanted to do?
I wanted to do that desperately, yes. But I needed a very special alignment of the stars for that to happen, especially back then. I had studied drama at high school. I studied drama at university. I was studying law then, but I couldn't go on to do, the LLB and really take studies as far as it needed to go. I joined the police in 1994 in Durban, and it was the best thing that I had ever done. I maintain that, and it was the biggest learning for me as a person, as a young man, as a South African, and as an actor. And it was only full 9, nearly 10 years into the police that the opportunity came up through an audition that was being advertised. And at that stage, I had built up a reasonably good resume to say that I can carry a role. And that's when everything changed. From 94 in the police to 2002 onto Isidingo, and being on that set changed my life.
So you literally were, while you were auditioning for Isidingo, still wearing a police uniform as your day job?
Yeah, that was still happening. And it was something of a novelty, I suppose, to industry people to think that, hey, this guy's a cop. And they weren't quite sure.
He can arrest you.
Yes, hide the drugs.
On that set?
Never on that set, thank goodness. But it was a laugh. And of course, I'd be teased about it, as you do. But it also gave people a different understanding of what my sensibilities were. I explored issues of life and death and childbirth and arrest and suicide and all these things. I had learnt and understood them, not through drama school, but through real life.
I can't imagine a better way to understand our society than that. I mean, journalism is not a bad way to understand it, but being a cop, sure.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, literally having the thick red gloves on, the ones that go all the way up to your elbows when you're picking up those pieces on the freeway after a terrible accident, and making the hard arrests, and coming out of the firefight and wondering whether you've got any holes in you, and all you do is just think that could have been me today. That could have been me. And I still catch myself. Sometimes I wake up dreaming about those little moments. They stay with you. They really do. And also that's what I don't have to manufacture as much going into a role, because I have a ready resource from my own personal experiences and memories to draw from.
It's quite something. Let's remind people of what I think most people remember you from.
Lee wouldn't have wanted me to hold on to the shares for your sake, but she would have taken me to task for throwing in the towel. So you stay. Clever old you.
Well done. I knew there was a spare key here somewhere.
And how would you take over Ben shares? Oh, nothing subversive. Or just nothing underhand. Honestly, just cold hard cash. Not very exciting. Very rewarding. That can't be true.
A few weeks ago, you thought my business plan was rubbish. Now you want to buy Horizon Deep Mine to try and stop me.
Stop you. Come on, I'm ridiculous.
He's still one of the best villains ever, wasn't he?
How did you get that? I can't believe you have it. It's fantastic. It just takes me way back. Robert Whitehead was the supervillain of South African TV. And I think anyone who's trying to be a villain anywhere needs to use him as the ultimate archetype and resource.
You were there for a long time, and you went from patrolling the streets, literally, to being stopped in the streets, I'm sure, for your autograph.
That's right.
That must have been quite a transition.
It was, and I never really got used to it, I have to say, because I have a grounding not just in being a public servant before I became a TV personality. And I will simply never call myself a celebrity. I don't understand what that species is exactly. But I also think about my family and the way I was raised. And my mum was my teacher. She taught me speech and drama. She taught me English. And I would never have been able to explain to my parents that I have absorbed this life of adulation where people want to stop me and talk to me and take pictures and ask for autographs and things like that. It just felt like shameless exhibitionism.
Yeah, something wrong with it.
Yeah, and it's not me. I'm more than happy to meet people, whoever they are, and to engage in a conversation where we are showing mutual respect. And somebody says, I love your character, or I love the show. I would love to engage with them, take a moment to talk about that, than to have to make it about me. It's equally about them. They're the ones watching.
One of the fascinating things I find about it is you've been associated with Isidingo. I mean, it ended many years ago now. And it would have been a huge breakthrough role for you, and I think for anyone who was involved in it at the time. But if you do it for a long time, you are always associated with it.
Yeah.
And then it's very hard to kind of do other stuff. So your later work is probably of a higher quality, if I may say, but people still remember you as Rajesh.
Yeah, it was a necessary progression and learning development of me as an actor and as a media person. And there was so much to learn. We all have so much to learn. And I suppose, and this goes back to something you and I mentioned previously about, yes, it can be good being on the show, but how long would you stick it out? And I was there for a long time. 15 years is how long I was there. And if they had renewed me again, would I have stayed? I think yes. Would it have been good for my career? I think no. because you, as a freelance performer, ultimately you have got to show a depth of ability to take on different roles. And in fact, from 2015 onwards is when I really started getting the villain roles. And after I started getting my beard, and I know you had yours long before me, but when I grew my beard, it changed all the roles that I got, and it made such a huge difference. And I realized, I should have done this a long time ago.
It's interesting because I think all of us, I think everyone at some point in a career wonders, when should I make a change? I've been doing this for 6 months. I've been doing it for 3 years. I've been doing it for 20 years. Some things, it's not a straight sort of promotion. It's not for acting, I think. You're the roles that you get improve, but it's not a straight from here to there to there. And that must be quite a difficult decision to make when you're going to leave. And in acting in particular, but I mean for many things, there's the safety and security. So I know soap operas 10 to 12 hours a day, but it's regular, same paycheck in your salary, no matter how many scenes you get, same paycheck every month, etc. All of that matters, family, etc. But then you want to do other things because they're more interesting, because they're better for you, they might be more lucrative. How do you go about sort of thinking through all of that?
Just some perspective on this. There are actually very, very few performers who can pick and choose those roles.
Yeah.
Of the number of people who are getting regular work on soapies and telenovelas and dramas and things, I would say you're looking at maybe 10% of all South African professional actors who have that kind of gig, which is quite small. So for the rest of us, we're all just hustling along day by day, hoping to land a gig, hoping to secure, something that's going to pull you through for a few days at least until the end of the month. And for them, it becomes, as you mentioned, the irregular income is a huge stress. The precarity of the work is a huge stress, and you can't ever get used to it. There's nothing that helps you to get used to it. When month end is the looming deadline, and you've got bills to pay and people who are depending on you, there's literally nothing else you can do except try and make up the money somehow. And if it's not coming through your acting work, then you better make sure there's other sources of income.
You have moved into, I don't know, would you call it activism?
Yeah. And typically, as we know, activism is an unpaid gig as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the South African Guild of Actors is an advocacy group. We have a very powerful mandate from hundreds of professional actors in the country, because we know that the cultural and creative sector is deeply flawed. It's horribly unequal in the way it's structured. Its injustices are built in a kind of way in the sector that people wonder whether this is even possible to get right. And yet we have to. We have to be able to align with international best practices. We have to align with the world when it comes to paying actors royalties. And SAGA is the body that is trying to achieve that. And fortunately, we have some very strong international alliances that are helping to guide us and helping to draft the proposals and the policies and making the submissions to the decision-making bodies that we have.
I'm intrigued. I mean, in the US and the UK, both for a long time have had strong actors, sort of unions, guilds, whatever you want to call them. I think of Equity in the UK. Is it the SAG in the US? I can't remember the one.
SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah. Why has it never happened here before?
It's to do with how labor law in South Africa encapsulates the worker. So as long as you are an employee signed under an employee contract, you are safe and you are protected by the whole raft of labor laws, from basic conditions to employment equity and the labor relations and all the rest. If you sign a freelance contract, none of that covers you. None of it. So, no, you don't get leave or sick leave or maternity leave. No, you don't get paid overtime. And no, you don't get to unionize, because that specific regulation comes from the Labour Relations Act. And if the Labour Relations Act excludes you on the basis of your status as a freelancer, then you are unable to unionize. which is why we had to form the South African Guild of Actors and not the South African Union of Actors.
Do you think that that's going to change? I mean, I know you've been mobilizing particularly around residuals, things like that. Do you get a sense that the balance is beginning to move your way a little bit?
Yeah, I believe so. And look, Saga has some very, very strong lobbying strategies, and we are talking to people who are starting to pay attention. We need people to understand that this is not just a project for the creative sector. This has to be part of a social agenda, and the social agenda allows for people to care about what's going on with these actors. Why are they not getting paid? You know, why is Mam Nandi begging for help to cover her health costs? Why does it have to go to social media? What happened to Brad Don Mlangeni's estate? Shouldn't he be paid for the work he's done on TV and film over the last 40 years? So as long as people outside of our sector start to care, then it becomes relevant in a political sense.
I'm always interested in these stories that we hear about, older actors, older musicians, people who've, really don't have much income or anything at all. And there'll be a 2-day story around it. And I mean, I thank the Sowetan for these 2-day stories because they're the ones who often do them, and well done to them. And then it goes away. Do we just have short memory?
Yeah, it's also to do, as you well know, Stephen, about the nature and the cycle of news.
Yeah.
So, you can play that game if you like, which is also why Saga is very careful not to play just for headlines. We understand that there has to be something far bigger that informs it. So the campaign has to do with principles, it has to do with politics, it has to do with justice and transformation, and not just about the plight of a single person.
We're speaking to Jack Devnarine this evening on The Money Show, How I Make My Money on Monday. He, of course, is an actor and chair of the SA Guild of Actors.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show. 6 to 8 p.m.
How I Make My Money, Jack Devnarine, the actor and chair of the SA Guild of Actors. Jack, there's a lot to ask you about your industry and your career. I do need to ask you a little bit about the US President Donald Trump. And when in your life did you think, as a police officer and an actor, you'd be answering questions around Trump? I don't think you did.
No, it's hard to factor that into this very colorful and varied life. But I suppose it would happen on your show as well, so thank you.
Yeah, it would. So he said this morning on his own social media network that he was going to impose tariffs of 100% on all movies not produced in the US. One's immediate thought is sort of for Cape Town. They have been getting quite a few international movies. My other thought is I just don't think it's possible to implement this. And then producing content like that takes 3 or 4 years anyway.
Yeah. And let's also remember, how does a film production earn its revenue? It takes years to earn its revenue, and there's so many streams that it has to go through in order to claw back its investment. Sometimes it'll go into the box office and make its money from the cinema release, and sometimes it'll go directly to streaming, and sometimes it's going to be distributed independently in different territories around the world, and so the lifespan of that title can earn money for its producers, for its investors, easily for 7 or 8 years that you can calculate, and beyond that.
So Snow White, the original, not the version that's out now, I think was produced in 1937. My children still watch it.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking about a movie that I will probably watch 100 years after it's been created. I mean, that's an astonishing piece of work.
Yeah, and it speaks to the point that you make and the question you have about these Trump tariffs. How could they possibly be implemented? Because typically you're talking about productions that go, let's just talk about an American production shooting on location in South Africa. Yes, you're using South African talent, South African crews, South African support services, accommodation, transport, and all of that. And you obviously the huge incentive for producers from the EU and from the US is our currency and exchange rate. That is a huge benefit to them.
And our sun.
Yeah. Light is everything. So they're getting all of that. They come to sunny Cape Town or somewhere in South Africa. And if with the imposition of 100% tariff, chances are they will still be able to make the movie. The real question lies in what about these the film incentive rebate? Because looking at Trump's post earlier, it was pretty clear to me that he seemed to think of this rebate as an attack on U.S. National or economic interests. And that for me is where I had to laugh, because a film incentive rebate is a standard feature across most of the free market filmmaking world, from the UK and across the EU, South America, Australia, even within Africa, you got Namibia and Mauritius, they all have film incentive rebates. This is where South Africa could potentially lose a lot, not necessarily because of the Trump tariff, but because we don't have a workable, viable, functioning film incentive rebate to compete with others in the same kind of territory as us, offering the same kind of facilities.
There's so much to it all, but I do want to ask you a bigger question around how the financing and the business of creating television and film content is changing. You've warned in the past of artificial intelligence maybe rendering actors obsolete. I suspect actually the idea of watching someone playing someone else might still be very much a part of it, but maybe not. I don't know. Are you very worried for the way that this industry is going to change, and particularly for people who have made a living up until now portraying other people on a screen?
My concern comes from the fact that whatever we want AI to be for us, and yes, it can be a very useful cost-saving tool and a creative tool, the problem is that it's not regulated in South Africa. And yes, you have the Department of Communications and Digital Technology that's working at creating some kind of a policy framework. But nobody on their advisory committee represents the interests of the cultural and creative sector. And we are looking at an existential threat. As you said, you can literally ask AI to create a fictional character, or if you wanted to, a character based on the image, voice and likeness of an existing actor. You can ask AI to do that. And because we are in an unregulated industry, it means that the actor doesn't have to be paid, doesn't have to give permission for the use of their image to be replicated in whatever film or TV show. That's the danger.
Well, on that sobering note, Jack, it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to see you again.
Jack Devnaran's the actor and chair of the SA Guild of Actors on The Money Show.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, U.S. markets mixed at the moment. The Dow Jones up 0.19, but the Nasdaq and the S&P both down by around 0.2%. And, of course, plenty to look through and pass. Some of it based on what Jack was talking about just a moment ago around the Trump's tariffs. Lots to come tomorrow on The Money Show. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.